Hi guys, hope you're well. I've got a great guest today, and I know I say that every week, but today I get to talk photography, which is something that I haven't done for quite a long time. So with the kind of growth strategy roadmap and podcast, this now goes out on iTunes and Spotify and YouTube, and LinkedIn is my main kind of channel. And what I kind of wanted to do when lockdown started was speak to real people that have interesting stories to tell, but the kind of genuine real people that I think you'll find interesting. And then what we tend to do is kind of dig into their kind of backstory, the brand, the business, what they do, how it works, in the hope that for a lot of the people that we speak to who are going through their own journey, there's always gems and nuggets of information and things that kind of come out, which, I believe you'll get real value from. So the person today I'm going to introduce to is Chris, and I'll let him kind of introduce himself. He's got a fantastic kind of story, which we'll dig into, and we're going to explore some things about being creative and that kind of thing as well. So Chris, I'm just going to bring you in. Perfect. So would you like to say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
Perfect. So we first met. It was a Northeast Times photo shoot for one of my former employers, and in a former life as a student, when I had no money, I used to make my money from photography as well. So I've always been into it since I was a kid. And one things that I kind of loved was I'd never seen some of the creative stuff that you were doing, which really kind of. Photography is a really funny thing, which I guess we'll also touch on, but this could be a very topical subject, where basically, because the barrier to entry to actually start is so low, you have a lot of people do it who aren't very good, which sounds savage. But when someone actually steps up and does something different that I'd never seen before, so in particular, I'm talking about it was when you had the projector and you were projecting light across people's faces. I was just fascinating for me, and I was just kind of facilitating the session. But at that point, I kind of knew that this guy was the real deal. I knew he was good. And then the more I would look through, and we'll touch on some of the other stuff later on. But my point is that although a lot of people, and again, me as a student, would have classed themselves as a photographer, you're a proper photographer. And that's why I'm keen to kind of pick your brains and that kind of thing. So would you like to almost tell people a bit more about yourself and where you're from?
Well, my name's Chris Owens. I'm a photographer, specialised in portraiture, and based in the Northeast. And a lot of my work is sort of around people within the Northeast business community. So people doing interesting things, who, entrepreneurs, people who are sort of shaping the built environment and the economic environment in the Northeast. And I work a lot with Northeast Times magazine, producing editorials for them. That's the general gist of what I do. I also work with all different clients, sort of commercial clients, doing sort of corporate photography for brands, websites.
So, Chris, how is lockdown treating you? I imagine it was quite difficult, especially doing what you do.
So I sort of knew it was sort of coming, like most people. So I had a bit of a mad dash to sort of finish everything I needed to do, where I was actually sort of going out and photographing people.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of finished all of that on the Friday before it was like officially imposed, because I knew it just wouldn't be possible afterwards. So bit of a mad dash, and then I suppose I've had the same sort of period that most people have experienced, where all of my jobs basically sort of dropped out of the diary. There's a few sort of hung in there to the bitter end, but I sort of were expecting them to drop out eventually. Just sort of coping with that and just sort of getting your head around that. We still had commitments to do some photography for Northeast Times magazine, because we decided to put out an issue like in lockdown. So we finished off an issue basically when lockdown was imposed, and then we sort of had to think about how we're going to sort of go about trying to do a similar thing to what we normally would with the lockdown restrictions. So I started doing stuff like shooting online. So I've done shoots via Zoom with people, which was like interesting. I've done shoots on FaceTime and found I just sort of explored different ways, alternative ways to try and sort of keep doing what I normally do, obviously in a sort of a different way, really.
Because I remember the Friday in particular that you're talking about, because I was running it was a social media, a video session at Tuss Park in Newcastle.
Yeah.
And it was when things started to kick off, and then we had loads of cancellations. And ironically, I had all my camera gear stolen the night before.
Oh, really?
And it was an absolute disaster. But I empathise with that. And also it's the balance of when you don't know what's going to happen to your livelihood and what you had planned. But people always talk about, be it music or otherwise, almost sometimes times of challenge, be it politically or economically or whatever, almost produce a lot of creativity, and they almost force the change that happens. So for me, it was live streaming that I always would go to a lot of in-person events and do the stuff I've always done.
Yeah.
But actually I thought, I'm gonna try something new. And since then, like today's one, it's being broadcast on a mobile phone using 4G, which again is a new learning experience, but it is what it is. We kind of get through. But I imagine even just learning to shoot from via Zoom, via FaceTime, whatever, is interesting. So I applaud your kind of endeavors with that.
Yeah, well, I think it's sort of a lot of people have, everyone's working life has been sort of turned upside down. It's just about sort of finding, I think photography in a lot of ways is about problem solving anyway. So, I almost quite sort of like relish the challenge of trying to get around it or do something, do something differently.
So out of interest on that topic, what's your biggest photography horror story? Or do you want to throw out a few? Have you ever had?
Well, it tends to be the same kind of thing. Like, people, because I'm photographing people, you will occasionally come across people who they almost, even if they're paying for the shoot, will try and sabotage it themselves. So, yeah, there's all sorts like that. I can't name names, but...
I must have just because even doing this live stream now, I've got studio lights. I've got, I think, a 7 light setup. Some do the background colors, some do my hair, whatever. But actually, the first time I did, so I was a student and I bought some Elinchrom strobe lights to just do black tie ball photography for drunk students, £3 each kind of setup. But what was quite funny, it was learning how to use all the kit, and you've got people jumping on backgrounds and the poles come down. It's just, it was chaos. And I remember once I was photographing a wedding down in Cheltenham, and have you ever done weddings? I don't know if you've ever been.
I've done a couple for friends, but I've not really. No, I've avoided them.
Yeah, but it was when. So you have a bit where you generally at the bride's house in the morning, do all the detail stuff, but then you get the bride when she walks down the stairs with the dad, etc. Then you have to rush to the church before she gets there to then get the entrance.
Yeah.
And so generally I used to shoot with 2 cameras, not to go too techie for anyone that's too interested, but one was a 70-200 2.8, and then the other one was the opposite, so the 24-70 2.8 Canon. And for whatever reason, my zoom lens wasn't in the mount properly, so I was running between my car and the church, and it fell out the mount, cracked on the. But you've just got to carry on, and you get used to all of these horror stories. But photography, it's unforgiving.
It happens. It's, lights fail, and I mean the good thing is you should. I've done loads and loads of shoots, and I've like sort of made mistakes on the ones that aren't important.
But that's where you learn your craft. So again, as a student, I didn't really. It's not that I didn't care, But you get my point. Is just that, but that's how everyone learns their craft. I was talking to a guy called Matt McGough who runs Ithaca Films in Middlesbrough, and he's a really talented guy. And he was saying that, again, at the early start of his career, he would make mistakes, but that's the whole point. It's kind of embrace them, learn from them.
I would say, like, people starting out in photography do a lot of test shoots and do shoots where there's nothing at stake. There's not necessarily a client, or maybe it's on an arrangement where, you sort of doing something for a client to sort of try something out. Mm-hmm. You can make a mistake and, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
When that happens in a live situation, you've got to sort of just ignore, it'll throw you off if you focus too much on what's gone wrong.
Yeah.
You just have to adapt. So I did a shoot last year with, like, one of my flash heads actually caught fire. I was photographing the Durham cricket players, and one of my lights just sort of, like, loads of smoke started coming in. There's a fire.
Crazy.
So I just had to take it down, and then I just did it with the light, the other lights I had. So you just sort of, like, make do. It wasn't ideal, but these things happen.
No, that's awesome.
Unavoidable, really. But.
So, did you grow up in the Northeast?
Yeah. Grew up in Newcastle, and studied at Newcastle College. I did, like, sort of art and design sort of foundation course, where you try a bit of everything, and you then sort of specialise in something. Like, specialised in photography and paint. I did painting for a bit, but then I realised everyone was, like, miles better at me in painting, so I sort of gave up on that quite quickly.
Cool. So I was going. So did you, obviously, as a student, then learn or discover kind of photography and that you were good at it, and then kind of develop that into your career?
Yeah, well, when I was at college, I was quite interested in sort of documentary photography and, like, reportage.
Mm-hmm. That's the cool stuff.
Yeah, and I went and had, like, as part of, like, research, me and my friend Dan Prince, who's a great photographer and filmmaker, we went and met with a photographer called Tom Stoddart, and he told us all about, like, reportage and, like, conflict photography. And to be honest, that sort of like put me off for life. Just sounded too sort of dangerous for me. And then sort of I got into portraits, and sort of I just started taking lots of portraits then, and sort of evolved. And I lived in London, assisted a great guy who sort of became my mentor, called Harry Borden. And he sort of specialised in portraits, and that sort of became the sort of path as I went down. Did quite awesome. Music photography, started getting first commissions, sort of photographing bands for magazines and for rental companies and stuff. And then you sort of think, oh, well, maybe I can sort of make a living out of this, and getting other sort of bits and bobs.
Is there anyone famous or anyone particular kind of gig that you've had where you actually, the images came back and you thought, actually, these are really good?
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes you do a shoot, and I got, not one in particular, but sometimes you're doing a shoot and if you're getting good stuff, if it's like just, everything comes together in that particular moment and you're getting good stuff. So you sort of, that as you're shooting it. So I don't really, I'm never sort of that too surprised. Sometimes there's a picture when you look back on them that you sort of didn't realise you'd taken, and it stands out from the set when you go through. But the good ones tend to jump out at you as you're doing them.
No, cool. So related,
ones.
Yeah, because I was going to say related to this is that I used to find that there was different sides to it, which used to annoy me, was that sometimes with clients, you will take a technically brilliant photograph but they seem to like ones that they just like how they look. Does that make sense? And one of the classic things for me used to be, you could always tell with people's Facebook photo. So that ironically, people generally at some point have good photos of themselves from something, wedding or whatever.
Yeah.
But often it's from a night out or something where they, and it kind of proved to me that it's not everyone appreciates good photography, if that makes sense. And I don't know if you've ever kind of come up with that, and almost it's because I guess as a business point of view, this being like a business related kind of podcast and show, it's almost how do you feel or how do you make yourself stand out and almost demonstrate to clients the difference between you and maybe someone else?
Well, I always just try and approach it in a way of where, you know, rather than sort of having an idea of I'm going to try and take a really flattering picture of you. Like I try to sort of take a picture which is, you know, what the person I meet on the day of the shoot, and you know what I experience their personality to be like on the day. So you try and like hopefully that comes through on the picture rather than sort of setting out. I mean, people tend to like pictures or you know, maybe not themselves, because we all have an idea of how we look and our own sort of self-image. You know, people tend to sort of gravitate towards pictures where they've been captured sort of where the mask slipped a little and it's them unawares. You'll see a lot of people with photographs from weddings and etc., where it's been taken on a long lens and they have no idea they were being photographed. Yeah. So it's, you know, it's trying to replicate that feeling, but in a more controlled scenario where I'm sort of in control of the medium of you know, photography and the lighting and you know, technically getting it correct, rather than setting out to I'm going to take a nice picture. It's sort of, if you can control all of that stuff, you can then concentrate on trying to relax the person and capture one of those moments where they sort of come out of themselves a little.
So can I ask you about Northeast Times?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So as an outsider, but someone that can appreciate good graphic design, font choice, layout, white space, photography, editorial, etc.
Yeah.
How, because Northeast Times was relaunched a few years ago, is that correct? And then what I was going to ask is how, because is Alison the editor, and it's how consciously do you bring together the different elements of creative to create the magazine?
One of the advantages of it is, I suppose, that Pete, who designs the magazine and is also managing director of Northeast Times, we've worked together for, you know, many years. So I think there's a sort of like a shorthand between me and him as to how he'll use my pictures, and I suppose he sort of sets the design in a way to make the most of those pictures. So in terms of the look and the layout of it and how photography is used, it's sort of based on that. And I suppose trying to sort of think of, I think when we relaunched in 2015, we sort of thought, well, you know, regional business publications are traditionally pretty dry and boring. That's, you know, for a number of reasons. It's, you know, whether it's a subject matter or, you know, the use of design and photography isn't very free. There's a sort of an idea that you jump to if you think business photography is a sort of guy in grey suit.
Out the front of a building, hiding in a bush, holding the product.
Yeah. And I really hate all that stuff, and always have. So I kind of thought, like, well, why can you not sort of apply the kind of photography you might make up for, you know, a fashion magazine or a Sunday supplement magazine? Why can you not apply that onto like a local press level?
Yeah.
Just because it's regional doesn't mean it has to sort of, look regional.
No, I'm
If
with
you
you.
know, it can have that sort of national, international sort of look and feel to it, which sort of elevates all these stories. Because we're always trying to shout about what is great in the region.
Mm-hmm.
So why not present it brilliantly as well?
No, I'm with you. Because I must have with so your office is actually, I used to live next door at the cricket club in Gosforth, in one of the flats that overlooks the pitch. So I've been to your office. But what I love is it's the attention to detail. And before the kind of we came on air, we were talking about different things. But it's almost like your paper choice and the layout. It's all very nicely done, to the point where in a former job, when we first met, I actually copied out almost everything about the North East Times for the annual report, the paper size, the font. Yeah. But it was I appreciate that it's so well put together. And then the one thing which I will comment on is that the sign for me of a good photographer is someone that has a distinctive style. And, if you pick up any North East Times or the digital equivalent, you can tell where the photo's from. And it follows through all the different editions, as well as you say with some other news outlets, or however you want to put it. It's the same stuff. So I think it's almost. How did you come up to actually create your style, or is it just a natural thing that you kind of just follow through?
Well, I think it's sort of, obviously I've been massively sort of influenced by, people I've learned from, people for photographers who I assisted when I was sort of learning my trade, I suppose. You sort of see the way people do things, and then you sort of adapt that slightly, and, whether it's lighting techniques or the way you frame things or the way you interact and the way you are with people on the shoot, it's for me, it's a lot more than just how it looks. It's about how it feels, and getting that idea of personality across in the pictures. It can be technically perfect and still a terrible picture. But equally, like, I've seen pictures which are technically hugely flawed, but if it's a good picture, it's a good picture, and I don't really look at it and think, oh, that would be a better picture if the white balance was slightly better, or was a little bit sharper. A lot of my favorite pictures probably are technically very simple. There's nothing sort of flashy about them. So I kind of just have a sort of a simple approach, and keep it quite low key. So I suppose the sort of style's born out of that. And you'll take it, when you're starting out and you sort of building a portfolio of work, you take pictures which you deem more successful than others, and you take bits about why you think that's a successful picture, and you sort of keep doing that, and you build upon that, and that, I suppose, that is what creates an identity to your work, rather than deciding I'm going to go and make pictures that look like X. It's something that organically, sort of naturally comes about, but it should do anyway. You normally tell when photographers are doing something.
It's not their thing.
That they're sort of just, it's a technique they're copying or whatever it is.
No, cool. So as this is like a business related show, and obviously that's what I kind of do, is that often one of the major things which impacts the value of a company, and both the price you can sell it for, but also what they sell and their actual sales, is their brand. And one of the things that I think is arguably, is it the most important thing? I'm going to say it's up there, at least top two, is your product and branding photography. And it was just from your point of view, how do you see that? Obviously, you've got a bias to it, but it was just, I think it's often when, like even just before we came on the call, I was approached about a company turnaround in Scotland, and their brand is good, but that isn't true everywhere. But often you do get business owners who they want the benefit to increase sales and grow a business. But actually there are often some easy wins where good branded photography to do with editorial and personality and different things, and the products, is massively important. But sometimes I think people don't appreciate it, or they just try and do it themselves.
Yeah.
and it rarely kind of impacts them more than it should. I just wanted to get your take on that.
Well, I think it's, when you can have a really brilliant product, but if your brand and the way in which you present that is substandard, your product's always going to remain on that level. Vice versa, you can have quite a good product, but amazing branding and the way you present it is exceeds the quality of the product. That can lift that into something it's perhaps not. It punches above its weight, really. And you see that with firms where it's even professional service firms where there's not a physical product, but it's about the experience, the customer experience, and things like that. And it's vital in my eyes because I'm like you say, I'm biased to it, but it's vital that you present yourself as an individual, as if you're in business, or a brand in the very best way you can do. Photography plays a huge part in that. I think maybe even more so at the minute, where a lot of our networking and stuff is being done online, and rather than having the opportunity to go and speak to someone in a room or speak face to face, and sculpt that first impression, a lot of people will judge you on rightly or wrongly on what your profile picture looks like. Do you look like someone that you think I could work with this person, I could get on with them, I'm interested about them? If you can get something where and I find people booking me because they want something where a bit of their personality comes out in the photography, rather than it just be a likeness of them to look like them.
No, I've got you. Because one of the things I think almost to do with brand that a lot of companies get wrong is that they might invest in they might get photos done, but then actually the consistency of their content, their tone of voice, how they talk about themselves, how they talk about clients, and it's one of those things that actually you have to get 6 or 7 things right to make the whole thing kind of fly. But I'd say photography is probably the most important thing of it. But actually, from a business point of view, I don't know if you actually do this, but the team that you have around Northeast Times, obviously you've got a lot of talented people. I think you could quite easily do branding projects for companies, because obviously you have the links with all of the people in the region, and you do a shit hot job at it, because actually you know exactly what you're doing, layout, font, photography, as a one piece.
Well, that is something that we've done for various clients who've come and wanted help with that. And I think probably off the back of what Northeast Times, the look and feel of Northeast Times, people have come with that sort of problem that we've been able to help them with.
Because that's the one thing that, especially with creative stuff, that you can't fake consistency again and again and again and again. So some people get lucky once with a good photo, but actually to produce, it sounds like we're just plugging the magazine, but we're not. But it's just, my point is to actually consistently produce good quality stuff. That if you hired that team, you'll get something good. Because one of the big things I spot about a lot of marketers is that they talk about how great they are, but the evidence isn't there. It's just not quite up to, it's not a 9 or a 10 out of 10. But it's a really funny one, actually, because when I talk to people about their businesses, you have to know your market. And for a lot of people, so in the Northeast, we've got a lot of rough and ready businesses. A 7 out of 10 is still probably good enough for what they need. But there are people, especially professional services, where a 9 or a 10 makes a big difference. And it was just something that I kind of wanted to...
I think particularly with professional services, because, if you're a lawyer and, there's hard and fast rules in which you can operate. So it really, your buying choice is often made on the brand and the way you feel like you'll be treated as a customer. And, the branding, the photography can help set that tone and give people an idea of what they would expect what the experience will be when you sort of use their services.
Oh, cool. I agree. I noticed, I think it was today or yesterday, you shared some video. And I wanted to ask, actually, how much do you play between photo and video? Because actually, you talk about the difference between almost, you were doing a video portrait.
Yeah, well, I that's really one of the first I've done. I think I've done 2 videos and that was just basically, I just decided to sort of flick it onto the motion capture mode, which I've never ever used on the camera, just as a sort of maybe. I kind of think photography for me is a way. It's a tool to communicate ideas, and whether that's a still image or like a moving image. That's essentially what I'm sort of trying to do, either sort of tell a story or communicate an idea I have or a message that someone might have. And sort of moving image is sort of a tool available, so why not sort of dabble with it? But it's not something I do lots of. I'd quite like to do more of it because I do find it quite enjoyable, and it's sort of a different sort of part of it that I'd like to explore.
Cool. So I ask all of my guests a certain kind of set of questions. And I do this because actually I think it's really useful to basically pick people's brains. But actually, it's also quite cathartic sometimes just to kind of talk about it. So would you be happy to share what is the best piece of advice you ever had?
Yeah. It's hard to sort of pick one sort of thing. You sort of pick things up from various people over the years and stuff. But I was always sort of had it sort of like drilled into me by Harry, who was the photographer I assisted for like quite a few years. That when you walk into a shoot and you're photographing someone, to sort of have the self-confidence that you're as good at what you do as they are at what they do. Don't be, it's really good bit of advice because it stops you from being sort of, overawed at, someone's accomplishments or their achievements, and you create a level playing field, which you can then start to build, a rapport or a relationship with when you're doing the shoot. I think it's a sort of an important thing to sort of bear in mind, especially I remind myself of it quite a lot. I've photographed quite a lot of high profile business people, and me coming in and sort of telling them what to do, or they're probably a lot of them are people who don't really get told what to do a lot by anyone. They're the ones telling people what to do. So I come in and sort of start bossing someone around, unless I have that self-belief and the confidence to sort of take control of the shoot and have an authority in what I'm doing, then that can go like spectacularly wrong.
No, I think that's great advice for a lot of people. So even just the company that I mentioned before, about the company turnaround, some people say, we've got this system, we want to do this, can you come in and facilitate? And I was like, well, if you want to hire me, this is how I do it. But my point is that almost, especially for people at the start of their career, you need that confidence that if someone's going to hire you, they're going to hire you because they want you. They don't just want a photographer. Well, they might do, but my point is, it's if you want Chris, you pay for Chris. And it's so I think that's a really good piece of advice, actually. Yeah,
but I mean, that's something that comes with time as well, that you build up that confidence, and it goes back to what we were saying about doing those early jobs and it's all about building that confidence, learning from your mistakes, so when you get into the position where you can start asking for X, Y, and Z in compensation for what you're doing for them, that you have the confidence to sort of back that up and say, well, this is why I'm worth that. This is why the magazine is worth what it is, or the photography is worth what it is, because you've built that confidence.
I think it's true on many different levels. The second question that I ask everyone is that if you were to give advice to your younger self, and it can be any age, background, school, career, whatever, what would it be?
Well, I think, you know, with photography or with any creative sort of process or creative sort of career, it's quite easy to sort of fall into, you know, you have your peaks and your troughs with it, where you can get quite down about what you're trying to do, and you sort of just feel like nothing's coming off. So, I mean, what I've found that works for me is just sort of trying to remember why it is that I started doing it in the first place, and sort of looking back on, you know, I didn't start taking pictures because I thought I was gonna, you know, make a career out of it. I started doing it because I really loved doing it, and I loved the medium of photography, and I was interested in it. So whenever I sort of get that general feeling that we all get, where, you know, the day to day of, you know, especially in sort of creative industries, it's quite hard to sort of churn out that consistency all the time, and you find yourself sort of burning out and feeling like you're repeating yourself again and again. So I sort of remind myself, like, well, why I started doing it in the first place. Something I did actually, like back end of last year, I was sort of feeling sort of quite fed up with it, really, and a bit sort of bored of it all, and feeling like just was going to jobs and just sort of going through the motions to produce. And, you know, wasn't that I wasn't putting my heart into those jobs. It just was that I was in a place where it was starting to, I needed to freshen it up in some way. So I just went and bought a camera, like a small Fuji camera, which I just carry everywhere with me. And I just started taking that out if I was, you know, going to the pub or just getting the bus into town or just going for a walk. I was taking that with us and just sort of forcing myself to just sort of document what I was seeing, and, you know, just take pictures for the joy and the love of taking pictures, rather than, you know, having to do it for, you know, money.
No, awesome. So one of the things that I offer to everyone, but it's also just, it's a good kind of conversation starter. Like, what have you got on at the moment? Is there anything you want to plug or talk about?
Well, at the minute, it's kind of, it's been great today because I've had a couple of jobs book in. So I'm starting to feel encouraged that things are starting to get moving again. Because I sort of did worry that, you know, people would be sort of worried to spend marketing budgets and stuff, but people seem to have identified that, you know, photography is something that they need in the immediacy. So stuff started booking in, which is really great. I think part of it, people have started to get their hair cut, so they're a bit more like up for getting photographed. I do seriously think that was stopping people from booking stuff in, but yeah, so stuff started to come in, and, you know, I suppose in terms of plugging stuff, like, you know, I'm available for commissions. I'm happy to have a chat with people about, you know, how photography can sort of assist them in their branding, and whether that's individuals or, you know, it's a lot more affordable to, you know, book me for an hour, and I can give you a suite of images.
Because did I see that you had an offer on, was it 150 for an hour?
Yeah, so I just do, that sort of tends to be like an hourly rate for me. So I can get you a lot of stuff in an hour. You know, we do a couple of different setups. Depends how quickly you can get changed, or how many different ways you want to do your hair. But yeah, I can get you sort of like a load of stuff for your profile pictures. It's important at the minute. People are, you know, looking at people's online profiles, how people are networking. So awesome. Available for that, or just for a chat about how photography might be able to help your brand out a bit.
No, it's awesome. And actually, when I saw the offer, when I was doing my research, when looking at your stuff, if it's still available, I would like to book you for that as well, because I've got some stuff towards the end of the year that I'm starting to build and bring people in to do the brand and different things. But when I think one of the challenges that a lot of startups have, so I'm now 8 to 9 months in, is that you have to almost get through the valley of death where you're not making any money. You need to pay your bills, and then gradually it starts to turn around, and then almost you get to a point where you're actually generating cash, or hopefully.
Yeah.
And touch some words. I'm just touching my desk in front of me. I'm now at that point where, for me, almost my approach to business and what I'm looking to do, and actually probably with the Northeast Times as well, is that my plan is to actually just keep reinvesting in stuff to build what I'm trying to do. And I definitely recommend to most people to actually do the same. That, yes, you need enough money to live off, but if you're in business for the long term, really properly investing in your brand and doing things properly will pay off. And I thought it was a great kind of offer, but we'll touch in on that off the call.
Yeah, sure. Just give us a message about that.
No, cool. But I've really enjoyed the kind of catch up. I'm sorry we had a few technical issues at the start, but these things happen. But we work through it.
Yeah. It's been really good to chat to you, and thanks for
thanks for sharing your story. And likewise with the Northeast Times, I genuinely do think the way that you operate and what you produce is by a mile the best in the region. Not to annoy anyone else that does something similar, but the quality kind of shows through. But I do, I mean it. And hopefully I will see you at a networking event or a magazine launch or whatever sometime soon.
That'd be great. Okay.
Cool. Cheers. Well, cheers, Chris, and thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
No worries.
See you later.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Bye-bye.